All right. And what's up, everyone? Wow, thanks for spending your lunch hour or your coffee hour with us. Really appreciate that quite a bit. Okay, so we got 29 people in here and we're already 4 minutes in. So let's just get started. All right, guys, what's going on? My name's Matthew Sciannella. I'm the Senior Director of Demand Gen here at Refine Labs, and I'm hanging out with Canberk, who is you're the director of Demand Gen, or you're the head of marketing now, aren't you? Head of growth marketing
Uh, I
at
can be whatever you want me to be, but they call me head of growth.
head of growth savant at Hockey Stack. So yeah, man, we're gonna talk the state of attribution and definitely anxious to hear your all's questions. A lot of this discussion that we'll talk about is heavily predicated on the great work that Canberk and the Hockey Stack team have put together in terms of their state of attribution report and some other reports as well that we sort of worked through in order to kind of come up with the narrative for this discussion. But I think before we even kind of get into that, I think one thing I wanted to talk about with you first, John Burke, if that's okay, it's just the effort of putting this together because it's a pretty huge endeavor overall. And I know that you've put the things out like this before. You even gotten a little bit of pushback on it. And that's really been something where we discussed a little bit about methodology and kind of diving into that. But overall, just before I ask you a little bit about the effort of putting it together, I do want to just sort of give you all credit for putting it together because it's all the things that we really evangelize at Refine Labs, and I personally am a huge advocate of, which is first party data wrapped into your POV, product led, where the product kind of supports the underlying analysis and finding the insights, but doesn't necessarily like lead as a product pitch. And then obviously, Jean Burke, with the work you do, it's also SME led. So someone who really can speak to the granular detail about it. And this is what is largely winning in SaaS right now. And if you're able to create and fuse all of those elements together into a content strategy and obeyed before you did such a great job of that as well at Hockey Stack. So I'd be remiss to not mention him too. I really think the work you all put together is stellar and it's super valuable for the community at large. And I think that's a lot of the reason why Hockey Stack is sort of really in a lot of ways leading the Attribution 2.0 movement and why we get so many people coming to events like these. So John Burke, first off, just wanted to give you your flowers publicly there. And then secondly, just talk a little bit about the methodology and sort of the effort of putting this together before we get into the details, because I'm sure people here have or want to leverage first party data more in their content strategy and just sort of don't have, I guess, the wayfinding or looking for ways to sort of enact that. So I'm wondering if you can speak a little to that.
Well, thank you. It is being recorded, right? Perfect, because I'm going to
Yes.
send that part to my mom. Thank you so much.
You should send it to Amir too. Like send it to everyone who has stake in your career.
But yeah, like when we think about how it all came out, it came from one simple question. We have all of the data and all of the CMOs I worked with so far, they have been asking me the same questions. Okay, we have these numbers, but are these numbers good? And even if we were generating amazing pipeline, even if we were generating amazing revenue, there was always this question. Okay, but what if the other companies? And that was the one simple question that we decided to work on. And the other question, after we answered that question, the other part was that, okay, what is our unique point? What we can do and other companies cannot do? And it was data. We had all of the companies' data, and we were like, okay, maybe we could create something like similar web for B2B marketing with all of the data points. And in terms of methodology, like I have always been a firm believer of high intent MQLs. And yeah, in the first report, there was a huge fuss about the methodology because there was no methodology. Like for me, it was all about, okay, the data is here, let me write on that data. And since I haven't had any content writing experience before, I was just writing whatever I was thinking. And obviously there was some explanations within the report, like how I defined MQL and stuff, but you had to read the report in order to see that methodology. And actually, Ashley from Refine Labs sent me a message after that report, and she was like, okay, maybe you should put a methodology. And it was actually the breaking point for me. And after that, we didn't have any comments about the methodology. And obviously methodology changes depending on the report. Like some terms stay consistent, like we have always used MQL as a consistent methodology. And for us, MQLs mean high intent MQLs, like all of the form submissions. But for example, if we are writing about interactive demo, we are adding a different methodology for the interactive demo, how we define interactive demo. If we are using the term outbound in the report, we have a different methodology. But yeah, there are some methodology definitions that we always kept consistent. And yeah, MQL, SQL, the way we use attribution have always remained the same. And to be fair, like this hockey stick labs, like it wasn't even something that we thought about. Like we had no definition of success, and we were like, okay, let's try and see. And this was actually one of our 5 experiments that we started running all together. But this ended up becoming the golden goose. And again, like we had no success metrics. And in the first couple of reports that we started to get a lot of messages on LinkedIn. They were like, okay, thank you for putting this report. Thank you for all of these numbers. And we were like, okay, apparently it is working. And that's how we decided to continue writing.
Nice. I think what's important is like you all work that muscle, right? You did it once, you realized, well, we made some mistakes, and you just iterate all the time, right? And so you come up with something like this, and your methodology is super sound. You get a lot less questions. And, this is the building in public, learning in public sort of rite of passage of doing this. And you guys have continued to churn out really great content that you get a lot of life out of, such as this event. So in terms of going through the experiment real quick, and I want to cover that methodology a little bit in detail. So you guys examined first touch, last touch, and SRA data and how it translates into revenue. You also looked at that once you kind of realized the delta that existed between first, last, and SRA through the lens of attribution 2.0. You basically ran all of this underlying data through your hockey stack product and then examined the touch points that were not surfaced by these 3 vantage points, basically windows of attribution, let's call them. 8,500 contacts total were analyzed over an 11-month period from 36 companies. I will expound on that in a little bit. And then you defined everything as high intent, being either a demo request, a pricing request, or a contact us submission. My guess is where they were verified that they actually wanted to talk to sales, and it was not like a support or something like that. So let's get a little bit into the companies, because I'm sure like I want to dive a little bit into the detail around there, because I was curious about this, and I'm sure people here talking wanting on this call want to know a little bit about the makeup of some of the companies, ACV range, things like that. You were kind enough to be able to pull that data. So if you want to give some detail that is actually not available in the report, this is your chance to break some news.
Yeah, sure. In total, yeah, we had 36 companies from our data set. And to be fair, the reason that we got 36, it was I think one of our first reports. And back then, all of the stuff was manual. Like Chris, my growth manager, he was pulling all of the data by himself manually. And like for each company, he had to spend like, I don't know, a couple of hours. So like in order to be fast, we had to be really careful about what we were choosing. But now we automate everything. So like we can easily scale up to 100 companies, 150 companies easily on the data set. But yeah, we chose 36 companies that had self-report attribution on their website. And among these 36 companies, the ACV, the average ACV was around like 22K, ranging from 8K to 90K. But to be fair, the company with 90K ACV, it was like one company, and most of the companies actually were falling under between 28, 30K band to like 19K band. But again, I think it is safe to say 22K was our average ACV. In terms of the industry split, now I'm going to check my notes here. So out of 36 companies, we had 28 software development slash tech, one e-learning provider, one biotechnology, 2 data security software, 3 IT services and IT consulting, and 1 telecommunication.
Cool. So for anyone who sells, mid-market or SMB, 15K to 30K ACV range, like this data is super, super relevant to you. And then if you fall way outside that band, like selling 100K plus, maybe not quite as much, but probably still quite a bit of insight to glean here regardless. But I think that's a really good level of detail to provide an addition. Obviously heavy on the software development and tech, and then a few other providers that probably sell into SaaS companies as well represented there. So awesome. Appreciate that. That level of detail. All right, so let's get a little bit into the results, because I think what was interesting here was just starting with the first touch, last touch aspect of it. First off, I think just in terms of this data attribution, I always find myself surprised at the number of companies who do not track first and last touch attribution in their CRM, but are very happy to have these very complicated UTM spreadsheets that concatenate values together and make your Google ad, your GA4 instance look perfect. And yet somehow none of that stuff makes it into a lead object, and God forbid an opportunity object in a CRM. So we'll get into best practices and stuff in that regard too, because there's this whole data infrastructure issue that I mean, I have looked at this point dozens of SaaS instances for CRM, and I can count on one hand the number that I think do a really nice job of it. But in terms of first touch, 83% went to direct organic and PPC. I'm curious on the PPC side, and you may not know the answer to this or not. Was there any insight into the brand versus non-brand PPC breakdown? Did you guys did you have a sense of what that looks like, even rough?
So we tried to do that, but then we realized that the naming conventions in the campaigns were a mess. Like some companies were using brand, okay, that was easier to split, but also some companies were just using the company name. And we could theoretically have got that data, but if we got that data, it would have meant that we would de-anonymize data. So in order to stay de-anonymized, in order to stay anonymized, we couldn't uncover the brand and non-brand stuff.
Gotcha. So in terms of the first touch stuff, so the other thing that was kind of interesting was classifying company page conversions as well, which is something you guys mentioned. To me, my belief here is there's a lot of people that see LinkedIn ads and go to the company page when they kind of see you for the first time. So you sort of lose that tracking anyway. But like, I know I track LinkedIn page visits a lot through campaigns I run, because it's probably the second most it's probably the second most clicks you get aside from the website visits themselves. So I think that was interesting. And there's also obviously the employee brand side of it, which is sort of this little bit of a nebulous aspect. Like, of the 36 companies, how many had a really great employee branding aspect of it, where the founder was active on LinkedIn and other people within the org were active on LinkedIn. That really is like a rising tide lifts all boats effect on on your ads. And I mean, a pretty constant theme I see here at Refiner are the number of companies who have active presence on LinkedIn and their founders are active, and how much that helps with ad effectiveness versus companies who are really relying solely on sponsored content from the company page to drive a lot of the difference for them and effectiveness overall. But in terms of the first touch, like any sort of insight, anything you want to share on the first touch, first last touch side of this from the report you guys put together?
Yeah, I think as you already covered, the most important thing for me was that 80% thing. Like, okay, we always knew that if we rely on single touch attribution, most of the stuff would be either from PPC, organic, or direct. But to be fair, I wasn't expecting it to be 80%, which was really interesting for me. And the other interesting part was that uh, if you look at the referrals and review sites like G2 and Capterra, on the first touch, actually they look pretty decent. Like, I think 4%, 3.5% in terms of all of the conversions, all of the MQLs.
Yeah,
But on the
3.5.
last touch site, it was like 0.5%, 0.7%, which was very interesting for me. And it was kind of proving one thing actually. Okay, people might be finding you on review site, but those review sites are not necessarily to be your last touch conversion part. They are the parts that start the intent part. Like with the first touch, with the review sites, the whole journey starts, but they do not actually end the journey.
Yeah. And I think like just it's not surprising that first and last touch just comprise such a huge percentage of the inbound volume overall that comes in. Nothing really stood out. The review site stuff did stand out a little bit as a first touch, people kind of doing initial research on that and then ultimately coming in maybe through a different area or a different pipeline source before they end up coming inbound. But yeah, and the other one was the LinkedIn ads as well, slightly
Yeah.
on the last touch. Which I found interesting, although the company page was actually lower. So that was another sort of aspect that I found pretty interesting. But the overwhelming thing that I saw was like software attribution basically is going to overwhelmingly favor three channels. You did this across thousands and thousands and thousands of contacts, and it really doesn't change. So what it shows is that there's just an enormous blind spot in most other programs you're running that don't involve doing SEO or Google ads that really drive difference for you that you don't have any window of sight into whatsoever. And so that really, to me, transitions into the self-reported aspect of it, which is kind of that other window where really not much difference between the LinkedIn SRA and the first and last touch. You get slightly more credit on the SRA with LinkedIn than last touch. And then to me, what I saw from this is like Facebook looked a little underinflated, but I think that's more reflective on how companies approach Facebook as a channel to me than whether Facebook is actually memorable or viable as a channel, because most people at this point are just using it for retargeting. And it's not just how you use it and whether you can be confident in it. It's tougher in SaaS to do that, especially if you're going to do cold targeting, for instance. It's just hard to target. So I see other trades like industrial trades where it's a lot more straightforward to do targeting there and people see a lot more success. But in SaaS, definitely a lot harder. But I think it reflects how a lot of people just use the channel amongst the data set here.
Yeah, and to be fair, I really want to write a report about Facebook and the difference on the Facebook spend and conversions between 2022 to 2024. And like you might remember in 2022, metadata was huge and everyone was using metadata for Facebook. So I really want to understand if with metadata, the spend on Facebook increased and if it impacted the conversions. And after the whole metadata thing start to get slower, did actually this impact Facebook as well? But yeah, we didn't have enough companies that we could test, and we couldn't do that. But it is still one of my dreams, because like I'm waiting to have like 25 companies in total, maybe more than 20 companies that had metadata in the last 2 years. We are really close to that. We are like at 17 right now. So probably I will be able to write that report, because especially with Cognism, like last year at Cognism, we increased the spend on Facebook significantly because we were actually generating pipeline. Like Facebook has become the second channel, third channel after LinkedIn and Google in terms of pipeline. But it lasted for like 2 quarters. After the third quarter, we started to see a sharp decrease and it never got back. With Hockey Stack, it now doesn't work. Like maybe there was this time on Facebook that it actually worked. I don't know why, what happened that time. But yeah, now we launched the Q1 report, Q1 2024 report in the first quarter. And we actually saw that the spend on Facebook increased significantly compared to the 2023 average. But although spend was increased on Facebook, it didn't actually cause any increase on the revenue side. Like, okay, now companies sort of spending more money on Facebook, but this definitely does not translate into revenue, not on the attribution side or on the SRA side.
Interesting. I want to go into the SRA side a little bit here. One decision you all made when you were putting the report together, and part of it is just out of necessity, but I'm wondering if you can expand on it, was like, organic, direct, PPC, we're just going to leave those as like these first touch, last touch buckets. I'm not going to try to, read tea leaves and try to assign any SRA to those kinds of channels, just based on the nature of the values you get back, right? So explain a little bit of how you sort of review the first touch, last touch SRA aspect of it, knowing that the two biggest drivers of SRA or of software attribution really can't be accounted for in the SRA.
That was the biggest problem. And yeah, that was, to be fair, the biggest problem, because as you said, like, okay, Google Ads might be bringing conversions and Google Ads could actually bring the last touch conversions, but in reality, nobody will be writing Google Ads. They'll be writing Google. But also, when people write Google, it could also mean people coming from content, like a proper Google content, like maybe from SEO or like direct, and they just type the name of the company on Google and they came organically through Google. But that's the problem. Like, how would you define Google, or how would you define Bing? And we had a lot of answers with Google and Bing. And okay, if people typed AdWords, it was easier. But probably people who wrote AdWords, probably they came to Hockey Stick and they were marketeers. Like, if you're a marketer, you write AdWords. But if you're not a marketer, you just write Google. So we classified all of them under search, and it included every answer that was like Google, search, Bing. I need to check the methodology there. Just a second.
Sure.
Yeah, we basically set Google, Bing, or content under search, And unless they specifically say Google Ads or like Bing Ads, we didn't use PPC.
Sure. And then I think another thing that's interesting is like how some people will answer. So they'll answer social media, which you can't assign any particular channel to that. So it's like almost like, do you make the decision to group all social media channels together based on the value? Do I separate LinkedIn because I'm putting a lot of budget into that compared to other social media channels? Can I safely assume social media answers are LinkedIn? It's just, these are kind of decisions you have to make, but it shouldn't actually it shouldn't really affect a lot of how you view the SRA data because, you know, you and I look at this very similar where each of these attribution points are just windows into how someone came inbound to your company and how they translate to revenue. None of these touch points are end all be all overall. So I think that's just an important distinction to make. I think another thing that was interesting, and this is something that you'll never capture through software, but you'll always capture through self-reported, is the number of past and current customers that come inbound to you, which I think is something that a lot of us, when they introduce SRA, end up actually seeing, and they're not sure whether to think this is good or this is bad. I look at it largely as a good thing. I think it speaks to how good your product is and how good your whole team is and it's, you know, if revenue is a team sport at the end of the day, I wouldn't be sitting there thinking like this is not reflective of what we're doing as a company. But I do think it's interesting how many of those values come in that you cannot capture it all through a software attribution.
Yeah, 100%. Like, I don't think there would be any kind of attribution software that could capture past customers, or like, I don't know, my boss recommended you because apparently she was using you previously. And that's why like the report itself starts with one sentence. Attribution will never be perfect, and there will always be stuff that attribution cannot capture. And yeah, like past and current customers are one of them. Even the events is one of them. And yeah, like especially events and past customers. And the interesting thing about past customers was that even though the total number of MQLs was like 1.5% of the total MQLs, it corresponded to 7% of the revenue. And it was like more than almost 5x return on investment. And I was just sharing this to Trinity from User Gems, and apparently this ended up being their value proposition at User Gems, and apparently Shopify is also using this. And apparently it is true, like we had the same data back at Cognism, and now we can see this at scale. If your past customers were happy with you, they will most likely bring you to their new company, and it will probably be a better ACV and a lower sales cycle. When you think about it, it's a no-brainer, to be fair.
Sure. I want to ask about the impact on revenue here. I got some notes that I'll go over, but when you were going through the impact on revenue from the first touch, last touch, SRA, what surprised you the most?
LinkedIn. I was expecting way more from LinkedIn. Because once we launched this report, just before that report, we launched the recap report. And in the recap report, we saw that maybe like 40% of the budget was spent on LinkedIn. And yeah, I was expecting to see more pipeline from LinkedIn. But also the other surprising thing was the huge difference between the PPC, sorry, search site, what we call, yeah, search content, PPC direct. They were like almost 50% of the entire SRA answers. But in terms of revenue, it was like 27%, 28%, 28%. And it was kind of interesting because, okay, we always said that conversions from Google are not the best conversions, like especially when you are selling B2B SaaS software, when you are selling ACVs that are like higher than 10K. Google is not the best channel for SaaS. And I think this report, it wasn't the most surprising thing, but I think it was a nail to the coffin.
Yeah, really interesting there. I was surprised. I wasn't too surprised by this actually, but of the going back into LinkedIn, and I'm not too surprised LinkedIn underperformed a little bit on the revenue, just based on the earlier report you all put out around the state of paid media spend, and just how like basically LinkedIn has overtaken Google as the primary paid media expenditure. And to me, given how expensive LinkedIn already is as a platform, I've long believed that we are way over indexed on LinkedIn as a channel. for a lot of us, especially if we sell to industries outside of B2B SaaS, where the market is, to me, not nearly as active as they are in other channels. And finding those watering holes is this whole other thing. And that's part of the reason why I'm excited to see LinkedIn roll out other ad formats like CTV, where it allows you to kind of get off platform and find people that you're targeting. But yeah, I wasn't totally surprised by that. One thing I was heartened to see, I guess, was 90% of the about 3,000 people that were served 100 LinkedIn ad impressions over the course of the 11-month period, to translate it into revenue, that equates to a frequency of essentially 9 per month when you consider the time horizon of the data set. And I think that speaks to just having a constant digital presence, even whether that's on LinkedIn or otherwise, because there's clearly influence there. And we'll get into the hockey stack impact, where I think that that illuminates itself a little bit more. I did like the word of mouth kind of as an SRA construct as well. I thought that was interesting, where according to your First Touch data, 90% of those conversions either come as direct, organic, or PPC. And on the Last Touch side, it's very similar at 88%. And then the social media as an SRA construct. So like LinkedIn accounted for like about 28% of all the social media SRAs, and Facebook accounted for like 15%. This is getting into the hockey stack side of it. So let's dive into that. And then I want to get to Q&A, because I don't want to just spend an hour going over the report. So give me a sense of, like, once you ingested this into hockey stack and all of this data, what did you find out that surprised you? What did you find out that confirmed your beliefs or flew in the face of them?
So I think the most important thing we found out was the impact of emails, which I would have never thought about before. And like, I had never done email marketing. I had never seen a success in email marketing. But to be fair, this has been a really good case study for us, this report itself, because after this report, I was like, okay, maybe email is working. And we started to do some email marketing with the labs reports. Now we are sending emails every week once the labs reports are out for our open opportunities, to the people who have been our live demo page but didn't submit the contact us form. And now email has become one of the biggest revenue drivers in hockey stack. And now it is actually speeds up the sales cycle. And we keep literally every day we have the wins channel, and Nate, our AE, sends a screenshot from a customer or from a prospect saying that I love your labs reports. Keep sending them emails. This report, one of the most surprising things I saw from this report is that, okay, email marketing is not that. And if it is used well, actually it is working. The other interesting part was that displays, like, okay, I have never been a fan of displays, and probably in the first 5 reports, all of those 5 reports were about how ineffective displays were. Before that, we found out that displays actually make sales cycles longer. They decrease the ACV. And here we found out that even if they bring conversions, those conversions don't convert, and they're they don't bring revenue. Like these were for me the most interesting parts that I started using.
Awesome. All right, I want to get into some questions that I have, and then we can get a little bit into just some sort of big picture Q&A. We're at 30 minutes in here. We've gone to the report. Bree was kind enough to share the link to the report. If you are wondering where we're getting some of this data from, it's buried in there if you want to read through it. But I'm curious, just on your take here. Like, you read this report. You created this report. You threw it through hockey stack as well to get this additional insight on the touch points. I'm curious how you create this, read this, and come to any conclusion other than needing to look at an attribution 2.0 solution. So I'll give you a chance to answer that.
I think the first thing we need to understand here is that even if you don't have any budget for attribution software, even if you don't believe in attribution, this report shows you that at least put the self-report attribution in your forms. Because like, even if you are using First Touch, or even if you are not using anything, the SRA will give you at least some understanding on what is happening. And I know that in some companies, the marketing teams can't get the permission to put that to the forms. Like, they have to at this as a second step once the form is submitted, or they make their STRs as those questions. But I think one of the most important things is put the SRA into your form and then put it into your STR process. Like not only make those people to answer that question in the form, but also STRs to get more answers, to understand the picture, because the amount of insights you can get from one simple form is unmatched.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And like to me, it's just you need to create vantage points for yourself. First off, you're never going to get approved to buy a tool like Hockey Stack unless you can show through other attribution measures that are uh, let's just say less automated, that what you're doing that is hard to measure is actually working, and you can actually give some proof of that. And this the quickest way to do that, since you're not going to see that really through the first or last touch attribution, is going to be through the SRA data, and as you said, the SDR attribution as well. And so you need to create ways to get that kind of qualitative feedback for yourself in order to make an argument that an investment like this is worth it. Obviously, you would pair that with in-platform conversion data, and being smart about that. I mean, having the attribution window be appropriate and match your sales cycle, just the little things, the little setup things within your ad accounts to measure those hard to measure accounts, and making sure you have that data right so you can make the argument for yourself. And I think
Yeah,
like,
actually,
hey, go ahead.
sorry.
No, go
Like
for
I
it.
remember, back in 2022, I submitted a demo request for Oribe, and I remember like I heard them from Dave Gerhardt's podcast back then, and in the self-reported attribution answer, I said a podcast. Then I had the first SDR call, and the SDR was like, which podcast? And I was like, I don't really remember. Then he hit the list, and he basically said, now we are sponsoring this podcast. Is it one of them? And I was like, yeah, it is Dave Gerhardt. And then he was like, okay, when did you listen to that podcast? I said, probably like a month ago. And he was like, noting that. And I didn't understand the importance of it back then. But now I can see probably not only they were measuring the success of the podcast, but they were also measuring the total window of that podcast. And he was like, is it 4 weeks or 5 weeks? Can you please give me an answer? Because we have different methods like 0 to 1 week, 1 week to 4 weeks, then 4 weeks and above. And I was like, yeah, okay, probably more than 4 weeks. But yeah, now I can understand the importance of it even more.
Yeah, it's true. There's this whole aspect of like date stamping, right? Or like time to inbound, where you start advertising or you start getting in front of a group of people, and they, are they're reading your content, they're seeing your videos on LinkedIn, they're getting served your ads, but they don't come inbound until a certain date. And so getting a sense of like how far that window is out from like discovery to actually coming in and talking to you is just something that it's basically impossible to record without, I guess, a tool like what you all provide. But like putting systems in place in order to try to get that for yourself as much as possible is obviously super important. I mean, in terms of just looking at other, I mean, look, we do not use Hockey Stack at Refine Labs. We have, and neither do actually many of our customers for that matter. So we end up finding ourselves trying to set up data infrastructure for a lot of clients. And what we normally see is a lot of customers or clients are not doing a great job of that. And like at the basic level, getting like pipeline source or like conversion path, like it's a high intent or it's outbound or it's low intent, lead source details, UTM parameters, self-reported attribution, grouping that. And then if you can next level it and just have first and recent around that as well, so you can get a sense of the whole attribution window that you can grab. Most companies are just not doing that. And I think it's just a lack of importance placed on getting those sorts of data infrastructure items in place, a lack of investment in marketing ops and in rev ops. And you just kind of see it makes it really difficult to measure how effective your programs are. Frankly, it makes the viability of an attribution 2.0 tool basically impossible. I mean, you kind of need all those fundamental things in place before something like a Hockey Stack or a Dream Data is going to bolster your data story for you largely. I mean, anything to speak to that, or do you have a different opinion?
Yeah, like to be fair, as you said, one of the biggest problems we had was that okay, we are getting customers, but they literally have no structure. Like they have no UTM structure, they have no tracking system beforehand, and all of the data was stored in their Salesforce or HubSpot. But obviously on their HubSpot or Salesforce or like on Pipedrive, all of the properties were messed up. There was like, I don't know, 3 properties to define only one thing. And it was a huge thing. Now, to be fair, we developed an internal tool, like it basically connects to your CRM and understands what is wrong, and it basically helps you to automate your UTMs. I don't want to sales pitch here, but we kind of solved that problem. On the other hand, probably Dream Data can't do that. It's basically Google Data Studio report anyway. But yeah, you need to first make sure that you have a system in place. And the other thing is that how much you are spending. Like obviously, if you are spending like 5K, 10K, probably first you need to understand the return on investment through SRA, through traditional attribution models. But once, I don't know, you scale up your spend and you start spending like, I don't know, 20K, 30K, then you need to understand what is converting at scale. Like up until probably 10K, 15K, the SRA answers should be enough. And to be fair, even with some of the companies that I had been consulting, like the early stage companies, I'm just consulting them for free. And what I create to them is, if they're spending like 3K, 5K on LinkedIn, okay, just get Supermetrics for like 50 quid per month and get the LinkedIn data to GDS, and then get your HubSpot data to GDS and track the organic companies that are coming organic onto your pipeline, and companies that you targeted on LinkedIn. And you can get this data for like $50 per month. And even that data will be really helpful for you.
Yeah, you mean GDS? You mean like by Looker, right?
Looker, sorry, yeah, I'm a boomer.
Yeah, no, it's fine. Yeah, I agree with that. We set Looker Studios up for most all of our clients through Funnel, and it's really useful to kind of look at the day to day and week to week. I think a lot of the heavy analysis around the SRA data, that stuff happens in spreadsheets. That happens with VLOOKUPs and things of that nature, and just getting into pivot tables. So, yeah, I think let's see if I have another question here. Do we have any questions from the crowd, by the way? Bree, or if anyone has questions, man, please drop them. It does not just have to be about attribution. Either Canberk and I are happy to chop it up on anything demand related. So please, if you have anything, drop it. Let's see, what did I have here?
Questions? I feel a bit offended.
Oh, I know. Where are the questions at, guys? Come on now.
It's the quietest chat we've ever had in a
It's all good.
Refined Labs event. Yeah.
No
Let's see what
problem.
people have to say here.
I have a
Here's
question.
Tony. All right.
Got a question. Okay, what's up, Tony? Good to see you, man.
So I'm kind of in the similar situation where I've got clients at KB that they have their heads in attribution, right? And there's obviously the different concepts between like what role attribution does and does not play, and like what adjustments you make to campaigns, both tactically and strategically. And there's a lot of obviously that debate is hot, and I spend a lot of my time sort of navigating that debate before we put our first step forward. So I have a question for you. How, I guess, can you guys, and I don't mean to put you guys on the spot, but do you guys have maybe an example of a client where you layered in this data, this marketing information system, went through the process of correlating upper funnel and lower funnel, and when you saw those insights, made a recommendation to them, right? And then what the outcome of those recommendations were? Because and we do this every single day, right? But I'm just wondering, how is it that, what do those recommendations look like, and how are they different or maybe more effective or relevant going through this attribution 2.0 model versus the attribution 1.0 model?
Okay, so I think I had the perfect example, Cognism. And before I joined, actually, Cognism was working with Refined Labs. So Refined Labs actually set up every attribution model, like single touch, first touch, all of the UTM structures. And once I joined Cognism, everything was the Refined Labs model. And when I joined, they had already got their Series C, and they were spending like $1 million a month on the marketing. And like, okay, we were growing. It was a demand gen model, so it was more like less focus on brand campaigns. And now we are seeing all of the organic pipeline increasing. And for us, we were like, okay, if we are spending this amount of money on the brand side, on the demand creation side, and if we are seeing the increase on the organic side, it must be working. And it was working. Like we were kind of getting the data from single touch, we were kind of getting the data from last touch. but obviously there's a huge part missing in the middle. And in my third month, we got hockey stick. And once we got, they released this new feature, which was basically enabling us to track from the first impression on LinkedIn, even if there was no clicks. And with that, we were able to see the true journey, because like we were still using the Refine Labs model. Probably they're still using the Refine Labs model, like content campaigns, startership campaigns, social proof, product value, and remarketing. Okay, we had all of these campaigns, all of these buckets, but we had no idea about the influence of each of these buckets into revenue. We were like, okay, we must be using these budget allocations that Refine Labs recommended. And once we saw the impact of each bucket and each campaign to revenue, we were like, okay, maybe we need to be focusing more on partnership campaigns and less on social proof. Or like, we are not seeing anything coming from product campaigns. Maybe we should be focusing on product campaigns for sales, but not for marketing. Like before hockey stick, Cognizant was still growing, and it was a really healthy growth. But with hockey stick, it was more like, okay, we are growing, but campaigns are working, but campaigns are working to what extent? It showed to what extent part.
Gotcha. Okay, so you went to Cognizant. You guys were growing at a clip. You got some funding. You came in and you started running demand gen stuff paid, and then some of the organic stuff, and you saw that was having a positive impact on pipeline and revenue. Then you layered in Hockey Stack, right? And then Hockey Stack revealed some of these things that were typically beyond First Touch and Last Touch, like how many LinkedIn impressions and all those kind of things.
Yep.
So, and the types of changes you made based on that information were things like, oh, we're going to run more social proof versus value add campaigns or different things like that.
Exactly, because we had like 4 personas, and we were targeting like marketing people, sales people, customer success, and RevOps people. And we were using the same budget splits for each of the campaign buckets. But for example, product value for salespeople, it was working better. But we were not actually seeing a huge revenue influence from product value marketers. With HockeyStack, we were able to see that part, and we were able to say that, okay, maybe we need to be allocating more budget to the different campaigns than the product campaigns.
Okay. So part of it was you developed more segment specific messaging.
Yep.
Okay. That's attribution or not, right? Maybe that's a good thing out of the gate, right? So, okay, I understand. So if you let me, okay, I understand. I'll pause now. See if anybody else wants to ask a question.
Yeah, if anyone else has a question, I got an addition to that, Tony, as well. Just like without this sort of presence of Hockey Stack and just basically just having good data infrastructure in place and what that can do when you run something like a revenue performance assessment exercise you are familiar with, and how that can help drive a strategy shift that can create impact for you. So I had one such client, really short sales cycle, like 30 days. So you were able to really drive a difference here pretty quickly if you knew. So they had First Touch and Last Touch and SRA, and they had their UTM data just all flowing through from the lead to they didn't even have an opportunity. They had a pipeline. They had something called pipeline because it was a lending company essentially. So they'd come inbound, they would essentially become an activated user. They'd get lend money. There's a yield component to it where they realize revenue from a percentage of the loan. So essentially what would happen, what we did is we went through, they had really good data infrastructure once we understood how that stuff all flowed to an account, and they had all that data attribution in there. So we were able to kind of run through the assessment, recognize channel-wise where they were over and under indexed. They were spending a lot on Facebook, getting really diminished returns there. Whether you looked at it through the First Touch or the Last Touch, it was still really diminished returns. Velocity was getting a lot lower. And then if you looked at, I rarely ever recommend people spend more money on Google ads, but if you looked at their Google ads, the velocity was really good, even if you were to look at their non-branded search. And then we looked through kind of what they were running through in the account and was like, okay, well, this setup was not very good, but they still had good traction on it. And then the other thing is, when you're looking at a whole account at large, or a whole company at large, when you're coming in as a new person, like, what do I have to work with right now? Like, what's the content strategy look like? How good is the product marketing? How much does it align to the people coming inbound and what they're asking during sales calls? And this client had really good product marketing, and they actually had really good video as well that was not, in my opinion, like being utilized well. So we were able to identify, like, first off, this was my client that I recommended CTV for, because I just saw an immediate opportunity to do that. and we kind of worked through the existing content that they had. They had someone who could actually cut it up for us in the formats that we needed, ran it. We immediately saw within the first quarter a huge increase. They increased their activation 61% over Q3, total lifetime originated revenue, and this is all cohorted revenue. Their revenue from Q1 of this past year already outpaced is like about 2x what it was Q1 of last year. So like, it's simply just, if you have the right data in place, when you run a really thorough analysis, the opportunities really become super clear, and then you can assess the opportunity across what you have to work with your entire company and make a lot of changes to what you're doing your go-to-market motion and drive fast results. So that's a bit of an outlier because the sales cycle was so short. We were really quickly able to see if it was working or not. But it is an example of like what having good attribution in place that maps all the way through, that you can analyze all the way across the funnel, can do for making effective changes to your go-to-market motion.
Totally. I will say that the two examples you both gave were things that you guys did well, being good marketers without any data. And then you layered on data to demonstrate what the impact was of that thing that you did.
Oh no, I mean, I looked at the data beforehand before I came up with a recommendation. Like, I mean, again, it's just looking at the lay of the land, and then obviously, yes, I want to assess it to make sure that it's working or not. And yes, there is a bit of chicken and egg scenario there, 100%, man. But like, but I mean, it sits there. It exists to be done if you put the time in to actually have the right attribution aspects in place that you can actually audit this stuff effectively. So a lot of problems with companies is they can't even audit what's working for them because they don't have the infrastructure in place to do it.
Yeah, totally.
Great. Let me jump in just a minute here. Thanks so much, Tony. We've got a great question from Alex in the chat. We want to pivot over here. Alex, do you want to come on and frame it up around tactical signal tracking?
Exactly. So Matthew, I was kind of curious to see if you have any idea about it, actually, because we're talking about like data structure, and many of us have HubSpot Pro and not Enterprise, and we don't have the feature where we can create custom objects actually. And I was just curious to see if you had like this workaround to make it possible actually to track throughout the journey. So I heard like maybe it's like maybe a workaround like around the lead object or so, but I was kind of curious to hear your thoughts around it actually.
Canberk, I'll let you, if you have anything on this. I have not worked. So the example I just cited was actually a Salesforce instance where they customized the object in order to pass stuff through. But Canberk, if you have anything that you can touch on there, I don't have a ton to add around the signal-based conversation, which I know is something that's being evangelized by a lot of people. I'm still largely wrapping my head around it. I find it largely more conceptual than actually practical at this point. And while I like it in theory, I've yet to actually see someone implement it, and then not just implement it, but see it work for them. So it is an interesting framework. It's not to me completely proven yet. In theory, it works, mostly because, you know, third-party cookies are just going to be going away, and so you're going to need something to replace it by and large. But I haven't seen it implemented yet to something where I've gotten really excited about it.
Funnily enough, actually, I just wrote a playbook for Yvonne today and for refiners.
This is your question, then go ahead.
Literally sent it to Yvonne this morning. But before I actually answer this question, what do you want to achieve? Like, what is the end goal? What do you want to be able to track on HubSpot?
Sorry, I muted myself. So, well, for sure, I'm just getting interesting to see, you know, in terms of like this unified data model where you have like self-reported attribution and like all the tracking around like the pipeline sources. And I was trying just at first, you know, to be honest, to just figure out also like where you add this layer of signals where you can really have like this follow through and see, you know, at the end of the day, what is working or not in terms of like converting from the contact to the closed one actually, you know. So
I think
but I'm more of exploring, you know, actually for now, just to wrap my head around it.
I think one of the most simple things, especially on HubSpot Pro plan, on the sales signal side, you can create just a custom property, like a drop-down option for the sales touch points, like sales signals, like outbound call, yes, no, then outbound call answered, went positive, went negative. Then you could do this for emails, and yeah, HubSpot Pro can probably get that email data, the sales email data automatically. Then you can create this journey, this workflow. If outbound call has been made, then if the same company domain visited the website in the next 12 hours, even if it is not the same person that the call was made, then create a list and put the company name into that dynamic company list. Then that company list, the dynamic company list, will be dynamically matched with LinkedIn, and then you can retarget those people on LinkedIn. This is the most simple way that you can probably use a sales signal with HubSpot Pro plan, but with custom objects, it is probably not that possible, or without Hackstack. Sorry.
Okay. And you said you like wrote this this workflow or this kind of playbook somewhere, or just
I literally sent it to Evan this morning, so probably it needs to be checked by Refine Labs. But yeah, should be available soon.
All right, good. Interesting. Thanks.
Yeah, any more questions, Bree? We're just about out of time. Tony, anything else from you?
Nope.
All right. I'm so happy you came up, man. It was so good to see you.
I know. I love this conversation. Good seeing you guys too.
You always bring a lot of great take to it, like really well thought out stuff. So we'll always appreciate when you jump in and ask a question, man.
Thanks, dude. I think we're all just on the same journey to be the best marketers we can be, right? So getting great.
100%. It's hard out there, y'all. So like, there's absolutely no doubt about it. I have empathy for all of you.
We do have one 11th hour question. If you want to wrap up, maybe just wrap up on Brittany's question here regarding why LinkedIn didn't perform as well as expected in the reporting to Canberk. We can call it a day until next time.
All right. So like looking at the data, the SRA answers were about like 13% of LinkedIn, but the revenue was 20%. So like the revenue was like 1.5x more. But considering the amount of money spent on LinkedIn, considering the targeting capabilities on LinkedIn, I was expecting much more, because when you think about our customers who are mostly like B2B SaaS companies, I would expect LinkedIn to be generating much more pipeline and much more revenue. And yeah, because I also like LinkedIn. So yeah, I have a bit biased.
I think a lot of it has to do with, and this is like almost a follow-up analysis, if you can do it, John Burke, is like, what does the LinkedIn advertising strategy look like? Are we running a lot of monotone static image ads? Is there a lack of variety? How good's the targeting? Like, what kind of frequency are we hitting? How big's our retargeting audience? Is that growing? That would tell you like, hey, people actually, our targeting is good, the ads are good, the messaging's on point. There's all these little sorts of things to evaluate in terms of why LinkedIn didn't perform as well. But my only hypothesis is that it's a pretty monotone strategy without a lot of variety in the messaging and who the messenger is. And then the other part is like, targeting. And I think targeting is just something that I see a lot of companies struggle with. We audit a lot of targeting and see a lot of waste there. So I just think it just involves its own audit almost as a follow-up to the analysis.
Yeah, and the fun thing is that now that LinkedIn Ads Library actually show you in Europe that the actual target locations. So I keep looking at the companies that target in Europe, and like apparently most of them just put EMEA on the targeting side. But when you look at the ad library, you can see that all of those weird countries that probably will never be buying a 50K software, 100K software, and like I'm not going to lie. Yeah, today I shared some posts from Claire on my LinkedIn, some funny ads that I loved. And also when I was looking at those ads, I was talking like who they are targeting, which countries they are targeting. And apparently like they are targeting some poor European countries like Albania. And I know that there's no company in Albania that could afford Claire. And even if Claire is doing that kind of targeting, probably there are a lot of companies who are doing the same mistake.
Yeah, I think, there's this rush to expand and do a lot of international advertising before you have traction in, the US or Canada or wherever your home base is.
Like, yeah, just don't put EMEA, just don't put EMEA, right? The countries,
Yeah.
Don't be a lazy person.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. All right, y'all. thanks so much for attending, being part of this conversation. People who came online to ask questions, appreciate that tremendously. We will definitely get the recording out to you all. I'm sure that Canberk is going to get a lot of cut ups from Stephanie, and we'll post the best of Canberk on the Company Refine page, and I may do it myself because Canberk is so smart and so great to work with. And sure, we'll have other Vault events with Canberk and others in the future. If you have not read that State of Attribution report, please read it. It's definitely worth a read. I'd also recommend reading the State of Outbound versus Inbound as well that they wrote, which is a nice pairing to that, which helps kind of illuminate other things. We use part of that to frame this discussion as well. So look, man, best of luck to all of y'all out there, cheering for all of you to be, as Tony said, the best version of yourselves and drive great results for your company. And also, have a work-life balance. That's important to have as well. So look, man, best of y'all. Have a great week. Have a great upcoming Memorial Day weekend. And I'll see y'all on LinkedIn and wherever else y'all hang out. Appreciate it.